When I speak of need, suffering, I'm speaking of the experience of existence, the sensation of flux. Flux being the sum of all patterns interacting. So interaction of patterns is the varying degrees of attraction, repulsion one feels for the other. Repulsion attraction is a relationship. It is a form of relating, or it's another word for interacting. It is a form of tension. Tension is both external and internal for a conscious organism, because the organisms, the sum of all the patterns participating in what we call an organism, an organization, are never in perfect harmony. They're never complete. There's always an internal tension within the organism. This tension is resolved by producing excess energies, which are called libidinal. Libidinal energies can be directed in the most primal, primitive forms of life towards growth or mitosis. Later, this evolves into the heterosexual reproductive system, and we experience this tension as orgasm. In some forms, this tension is reserved as a backup in waiting, in preparation for the fight-flight mechanism. The organism is always in a state of varying degrees of stress. So in an organism made up of two or more patterns, this attraction-repulsion is balanced. And it is called a unity, which is a balance of opposites. The ideal, the nihilistic ideal of getting rid of opposites, opposition, of conflict, is a secret desire to die, to stop existing, to stop experiencing existence. We can now understand nihilistic spirituality as the Abrahamic trio, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, as a secret desire, a secret death wish, a secret desire to relieve, to stop this tension, this stress, by merging with the unity, the one, where there is no opposite, and so there is no tension. This is what the metaphor of paradise really means: eternal peace, the eternal one. Therefore, what we call self, ego, is an aggregate of patterns interacting in a state of constant tension. And this is what produces the personality. And this personality relates to a world in constant tension, in constant opposition. So it's a relationship of tensions, of oppositions. What holds the organism as one is an objective. On a primitive level, that objective is always self-preservation, survival. Later, with the expansion of the perceptual event horizon, this objective might become an ideal, which might be disconnected from reality, making a nihilistic ideal, within which the death wish can become, can hide, can pretend it is a life wish. Power can be understood now as the strength of this libidinal energy, this accumulated stress energy, in relation to other organisms and in relation to patterns which are not living, which are not part of an organic unity. The desire to continue living, to survive, coexist within the organism alongside the desire to end, to die. This is more so in an organism that can project into the future probabilities, like with human beings. In fact, with humans, this tension between the life survival principle and the death principle is most accentuated. Now, which way the organism leans is dependent on the aggregate energies within the organism, its constitution in relation to the world and in relation to other organisms. Most often, the death wish, the self-destructive impulse, is converted into a positive. This is what I call positive nihilism. In other words, the idea becomes the inversion point, becomes the symbol of this inversion. And since the nihilistic idea does not exist, has no reference in the real world, you can always distinguish the nihilistic ideal from the realistic ideal by the fact that it is disconnected from reality. The degree of this disconnect determines the degree of the death wish within the organism that aspires towards that ideal. In every ideal, in every abstraction, it is constructed by assimilating into one coherent model external sources of stimuli and internal sources of stimuli. The degree by which one dominates over the other determines the degree to which the ideal corresponds to the real. In other words, it determines the realism of the ideal, its utility within the real world, its realization possibility, because an ideal that is completely detached from reality has no chance of being realized. And most often this is used by nihilists as a way of leveling everything down, surrendering to victimhood, to a sense of despair, which then seeks salvation in some mysterious, mystical other. In every ideal, in every abstraction, it is constructed by assimilating into one coherent model external sources of stimuli and internal sources of stimuli. The degree by which one dominates over the other determines the degree to which the ideal corresponds to the real. In other words, it determines the realism of the ideal, its utility within the real world, its realization possibility, because an ideal that is completely detached from reality has no chance of being realized. And most often this is used by nihilists as a way of leveling everything down, surrendering to victimhood, to a sense of despair, which then seeks salvation in some mysterious, mystical other. My usage of the word pattern is not accidental, it is intentional. For me, the word is the most appropriate to use to describe this flux interacting, because it is the most abstract, void of any other interpretation, nuances. Because I don't want to insert into the concept some other concept which I cannot justify, as others do. This is what others do sometimes. They take a rational concept and they use a word that has connotations which they can then insert into the concept without actually having to justify them. So they imply something more than what the concept is. patterns interacting in what we call flux or existence implies its opposite, that is, non-patterns interacting. And this we can also understand or call randomness or chaos. So we have this interplay of chaos and order in what we call existence. Hellenic balance means the acceptance of both the chaos and the order, the positive and the negative, both words in relation to organic needs, desires, the acceptance of this interplay, this conflict. So when somebody is pessimistic, this is a relative term. If somebody is too optimistic, then anything that hints at negativity, it would appear to him as pessimistic. And for the pessimist, anything that hints at positive would be optimistic. So in order to find the perfect balance, the mind has to constantly refer to the cosmos, to the standard, which is the world, the objective, and then adjust his subjective interpretations, his abstractions to that world. And since moderns are eternally optimistic because they're so sheltered and delusional and have convinced themselves that whatever they prefer is actually the case, because they are sheltered, protected from the consequences, as I've noted elsewhere. Anything that hints at reality, at realism, is for them something negative, something pessimistic. And this, of course, goes back to their very usage of the word nihilism in reference to a reality that is void of all the things they desire for themselves. They would prefer to exist, such as God, such as universal morality, such as meaning, such as purpose, which they do not have to create, but have to be given. It has to be given to them. Or their only mission, which again is a Christian mission, is to find it, waiting for them somewhere out there. Salvation, to give themselves to it. In the Abrahamic worldview, in Abrahamic spiritual nihilism, the negative is called Satan, evil, and the positive is called God, good. And this reflects again their delusional, fearful, detached relationship to the world. So everything which is contrary to their desires is evil, it is bad. And everything that is in tune with their desires, it is good, it is divine. This makes every conversation with them highly problematic. It would be like discussing philosophy with a child. You always have to take into account the child's feelings, its future potentials. You have to protect the child because it is not yet mature. And this is the case with the moderns. They have been so sheltered from any experience of need suffering above a certain level that they have not matured. They remain in a state of stunted development or retardation. Given the previous, the state of retardation, and then adding to it this social rule of all inclusion, automatically means everything has to be reduced down to a retarded level. So when you're discussing philosophy, let's say, and you want mass participation, this is your ideal, to include as many into the conversation as possible, to respect all opinions equally, then what you have is the decline of the conversation to one where the median, the average, can comprehend, or which does not hurt the majority, or sometimes when it is extreme, doesn't hurt anybody. So the conversation becomes childlike, infantile, retarded. It would be like having an adult gathering and then for some reason including children into the gathering. Well, the gathering will not be anything above the child level, because the children will distract the adults. They will reduce the focus to their level. So it will all become a game of a childish game, a gathering perhaps entertaining and fun, but no longer productive, no longer serious. This is why all political discourse in our modern times of pseudo-democracy is reduced down to the inane, to the infantile, to the adolescent, because that's the median level of comprehension of the average voter out there, the average participant in the democratic process. And by reducing philosophy to politics, we can see how even philosophy now has become infantilized. It's become a toy to be played with for children to pretend that they're intellectual, that they're mature, that they're thinking, when they're just regurgitating words in a sequence, like a rap tune. Word association raised to the level of art. And if we observe the art scene in modern cultures, in the West especially, we can see this correspondence, this infantilization of art, where we just sample from what has been successful in the past, and then we just use sexual innuendo and materialism and ego displays, hypermasculine displays, to produce word associations, pretty rhymes, but with no deep meaning, just something that is impressive, that is entertaining, distracting, that is perhaps pleasing in the most shallow understanding of the word pleasing. When it's all about word association, then the sequence of the words doesn't really matter. There is no world to limit the sequence, to determine the sequence of the word, to inhibit certain sequences. It's just a matter of what is most pleasing. If the rhyme sounds good, if the meanings expressed in the rhyme are positive, offer gratification on some level. Therefore, ignoring the world, nature, the mind frees itself from the determinations, the causal chains which would limit its free associations, its pleasure seeking, its self-gratifying word usage, its masturbation. When absurdity becomes commonplace, when detachment and delusion and disillusionment becomes the norm, then any attempt to go opposite to this trend will be considered an illness, a sickness. The only rule, as I've noted many times before, is that you don't take away the right of the other to be as delusional as you are, to be as detached as you are. You don't intrude upon his delusion. That's the social convention, that's the social rule. That's the only rule that the modern accepts, because it's the only rule that would destroy his hypnotic state and would disrupt the state which maintains him in hypnosis. With no objective world to measure the idea against, the modern only has other minds, other moderns to measure the idea against. And since other moderns are in the same condition of self-hypnosis, of disillusionment, of delusion, then the standard slowly declines and declines, dumbing down the entire process until the whole system implodes under the pressure of stupidity. Because in the meantime, the cosmos remains unaffected by this human playtime, this human practice, this human masturbation. It is indifferent to what humans do.